Hello Dragons, welcome back to day number 2 of Algebra 1. I am Miss Habits and I am one of the Algebra 1 teachers and I will be doing the lesson for you today. Unfortunately, you will only be watching my amazing hands. I'm kind of like Shin Lim from America's Got Talent, but you can only see my hands. You need to get your notebook paper, make sure you're ready to take notes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our paper in the style of Cornell notes. So you're going to draw a line down one side, and I'm going to put my title over here. So my title is going to be, I'm going to do U1 Day 2. This pencil is not working very well. Let me switch. Okay, this stands for Unit 1 Day 2, and we are going to do tables to linear equations using a 3-column process chart. This sounds really complicated, but it's really not. A 3-column process chart. Okay, tables to linear equations using a 3-column process chart. And I'm going to do a line right here for our title. 3-column process chart, we kind of abbreviate to a 3CPC. So if you hear your teacher talking about a 3CPC, that's what they're doing. They're changing a table of points into a linear equation. Okay, so I think the first thing I'm going to ask you is, what is a linear equation? A linear equation, that's right, is the equation of a line. And what you learned, hopefully, in middle school is that the equation of a line, I'm going to put this over here in my important information column, is y equals mx plus b. This is a linear equation. It's not the only form of a linear equation. This equation is called the slope-intercept form because it has a slope and an intercept, a y-intercept. So m stands for my slope and b stands for my y-intercept. Okay? And I think they use the letter M for slope supposedly because to climb is monter in French, and so they use the M. You can think of slope of a mountain, and so it makes sense that it's an M. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, 2 examples. So here's the first one. Example 1. I'm going to give you a list of points. The first point is 2, 7. The next one is 4, 11. The next one is 6, 15. And the next one is 8, 19. Now, these are points. And remember, every point is an XY value. You can't just have a point with one number. You have to give me an X and a Y. So these are all X and Y values. Okay? So these are literally points on a graph. So I'm just going to sketch this graph out just so we kind of know what we're talking about here. And this doesn't have to be super accurate. I'm just sketching an x-axis and a y-axis. The 0.27, I'm going to say, is about right here. I'm just going to kind of go out 2, up 7 on this small little graph. I'm going to go out 4, up 11, out 6, up 15. And if I had an actual grid, you could see that this is going to start forming a straight line. So we know that this is linear. So if these are linear points, which they are, we can find out the equation that goes through these points. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these points into a table, an XY table. So we know we can take these points and we have an X and a Y, and we can say our X values, or our input values, are 2, 4, 6, and 8. My output or Y values are 7, 11, 15, and 19. Okay? So right now I've got 3 different representations of the same thing. I've got a list of points, I've got a graph, I've got a table, and now I'm going to want an equation because there's all these different ways that I can represent this data. So in order to find the equation that goes through this data, we're going to make something called a 3-column process chart. So I'm going to make my chart down here. I want you to make your chart, and then we will go through how to find that equation. So it's just a table but I'm going to have a column in the middle that's my process column that's going to be wider than the two columns on the outside. So my x values are still going to go right here. My y values are still going to go right here, but I've got to find my linear equation, which is going to be my mx plus b. Okay? So my x values are from my x column in my table. I'm literally just going to write them down here. 2, 4, 6, and 8. I'm actually going to add an x at the bottom because once I find my equation, it should work for any x value or any input value. These are my input values. This is my output. I'm going to go ahead and write that up here. These are my inputs, and my y values are my outputs. Okay? So there's my x values, and I'm going to write my y values here. So I have 7, 11, 15, 19, and then I'm going to put a y. Just like I put an x at the bottom here, I'm going to put a y. Now what I'm trying to figure out is what is my mx plus b? What is my linear equation? Well, my slope, or my m value, is my change in y divided by my change in x. And in mathematics, a lot of times we use the Greek letter delta, which is just a little triangle, to mean change in. So that's going to be change in y divided by change in x. So I need to find my change in y divided by change in x in order to find my slope. So let's go over to my y values here. I'm going to figure out what is my change between 7 and 11. What do I have to do to the number 7 to get the number 11? Do I have to add or subtract? Right, I have to add 4. So my change in y right there is a positive 4. And I usually just go down all of the values and make sure that I didn't make a mistake. So I'm like 11 plus 4, does that equal 15? Yes. Okay, 15 plus 4 equals 19. Okay, so my change in y is equal to a positive 4. So that's my delta y, or my change in y. Okay, my change in x on the other side here, I am going to do the same thing. So to get from 2 to 4, I have to add 2. To get from 4 to 6, I have to add 2. To get from 6 to 8, I have to add 2. So my positive 2, that is my change in x. Okay? So here's my change in x, here's my change in y. So my slope, my m value, is equal to change in y divided by change in x, which is equal to, change in y is 4, divided by 2, so that will give me a slope of positive 2. So I'm going to take that positive 2 value and I'm going to plug it in under the m in every single row all the way down. So I found the slope is 2, so I'm going to write that under the m. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Next, I need to write my x values. Well, I don't just want to take them and plop them over here. I've got to put an indication of multiplication because this is m times x. So I'm going to use parentheses. So I'm going to go parentheses, 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 parentheses. All right? So I have my m. Now my x, where do I get my x values? My x values are right here. So I literally just take these values and plop them right here in these rows. So this x goes here, this x goes here, and so on. And I go ahead and do that for the last row as well because this is going to tell me what my equation is. Okay? So I've got my m, I've got my x, now I need to figure out my b. Now the equation says plus, but it could also be minus. We don't know. What I'm trying to do is I'm saying if I input this x, this value of 2, and I multiply that by 2, what do I then have to do to get the number 7? So I go 2 times 2 is 4. What do I have to do to 4 to get to 7? Right, I have to add 3. So that's going to be plus 3. So it is going to be a plus in this case. Let's make sure that it works. It's got to work for every row if it's the correct answer and we didn't make any mistakes. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 3. Does that output 11? Yes. Try it again. 2 times 6 is 12 plus 3 is 15. 2 times 8 is 16 plus 3 is 19. And 2 times x, therefore, since they all work, that means 2 times any x plus 3 is going to equal the y value on this line. Okay, so I'm going to take this part right here, and I'm just going to turn it around. My equation is, if I read it backwards, y equals 2x plus 3. So I'm just going to write the equation here that we found. My linear equation for those points is y equals 2x plus 3. That is my equation that I was looking for. Okay, that is my linear equation. Now, we're going to try one more example, and then we're going to go to the calculator, and I'm going to tell you how to check these, okay? So let's just draw a little line here, and let's try another example. So here's example 2. So example 2, I'm going to give you another list of points. So I have the point 2, negative 2. I have the point 4, negative 3. The point 6, negative 4. And the point 8, negative 5. Okay, so again, these are just xy pairs. Let me move this up a little bit. These are just xy pairs. These are points, okay? Now, I'm not going to draw the graph this time. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this is linear. So let's go ahead and make our table and our process column. So here's my table. So my x's and my y's, my x values, I'm going to go 2, and then my y value is negative 2. 4, negative 3, 6, negative 4, and 8, negative 5. So I've changed from points to a table, same thing, just different representation. So now let's go ahead and do our 3-column process chart. Okay, so I'm going to draw another table, but it's going to be wider. Title this column X, this one is MX plus B, and this one is Y. So let's go ahead and put in our X values and put in our Y values. So you go ahead and do that, and I will do the same. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, and the only thing I'm going to add down here, remember, is a generic X at the bottom. Then my Y values, I have negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, and I'm going to put that Y value. Okay? Now again, what do I have to find first to get the slope? That's right. Remember, the slope is change in y divided by change in x. So I have to find my change in y. Now, some people get a little bit confused when we start doing negative numbers. You've got to think of your number line here. So I'm going to draw just a tiny little number line up here. So remember, in this case, let's put the number 0 right there. Remember, I've got a number 1 here. I've got a number negative 1, and then I go negative 2, negative 3. I'm not drawing the whole number line, but I just want to give you the idea. When I'm going from negative 2 to negative 3, am I going from to the left or to the right? Correct, I'm going to the left. If I go to the left on a number line, I am subtracting, okay? I am subtracting. So I know that I'm going to subtract because I'm going to the left. If I'm going to the right, I'm adding. So if I'm going to the left, then my number here is going to be negative. Okay, so this is going to be a negative 1. Another way, if you are completely confused about this and you have trouble with this, grab your calculator and turn it on. And what you can do is take the second number minus the first number. So I'm literally going to type in negative 3 minus negative 2. And here's a little hint on the calculator. There are 2 buttons with negatives and minuses on them. So if you look at this calculator, this little button right here means negative. This button right here is minus. So if you would say the word negative when you read a problem, you would hit this button. If you would say the word minus, you would hit this button. So for example, if I'm telling you to take the first one, or I'm sorry, the second value subtracted from this one minus this one is what I'm trying to say. That would be, if I wrote that down out here, that would be negative 3 minus negative 2. Take this one minus this one. So if I'm putting that in the calculator, say it to yourself. I have negative 3 minus negative 2. So I'm going to put that in the calculator this way. I'm going to hit the negative key, because I'm going to say the word negative. So negative 3, then the minus negative 2. And that's going to give me a negative 1. Okay? So again, if you would say the word negative when you're reading the problem, use the negative key down here at the bottom. If you would say the word minus, use this, because that tells the calculator how to operate. Okay? Okay, so that's negative 1. And again, if I'm doing my change in y all the way down, it's going to be -1 all the way down. So that equals my change in y, my delta y. So now what do? Right, I go over to the x side because I have to find my change in x. So what do I do to 2 in order to get 4? I add 2. And again, you can do the second one minus the first. Go 4 minus 2, and that gives you 2. 6 minus 4 gives you a positive 2 as well. 8 minus 6 gives you a positive 2 as well, okay? Sometimes people get confused with the negatives. So now I know that my slope, I'm going to write it down here because I've got some room down here. So my slope is my change in y divided by change in x, which is, in this case, -1 divided by positive 2. And that is, oh sorry, I don't need to write equals, that is my slope. So that's my m value. So let's go do our process. -1/2, -1/2. And please write your fractions vertically. Please try to stay away from writing them like this, because when you start putting x's in there, it looks like the x is with the denominator and it's not really. So try not to do this anymore. Try to write them vertically straight up and down. So -1/2, -1/2, -1/2, -1/2, -1/2, parentheses, 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 parentheses. Okay, just get in the habit of doing that. My little slope goes bzzz, right in here, all the way down. X's go all the way down, and now I'm going to plug my x's in. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, x. Now, if you are good with multiplying fractions, fine, that's awesome. If you are not so good, take your calculator and you can say -1/2 times 2. Times means of, so if you're going to say -1/2 of 2, what's 1/2 of 2? Well, it's 1. So my answer is going to be -1. But if you're not really sure about that, let's go ahead and put it in the calculator. So I would say negative, not minus. So I'm going to put in negative. And the way I put in 1/2 is 1 divided by 2. That fraction bar is simply, it simply means divide. So 1/2 parentheses 2, so that's -1/2 times 2 gives me -1, okay? So I'm at -1 right now, but I need to go to -2. So remember, I'm at -1, I need to go to -2, so I'm going to subtract another 1, and that's going to get me to -2. Now, if I input a 4, 4 times -1/2. If you think, what is 1/2 of 4? It's 2, but we're negative here, so that's going to be -1/2 times 4 is equal to -2 minus 1. Does that give me -3? Yes. Half of 6 is 3. -1/2 times 6 is -3, so I'm at -3. Minus 1 gives me -4. So we see that this is working all the way down. -1/2 times 8 is -4, minus 1 is -5. If all of those work, then I can safely say that my generic equation down here is going to be a -1 equals to my y value. For any input that I put in, if I do this operation, these operations on it, I'm going to get the output of y. So my equation is y equals -1/2 x, again straight up and down, minus 1. Okay? Those are the two examples. So now let's go back and see how we are going to check these using the calculator. Okay? So I'm going to, let me go ahead and write down the steps of using the calculator, and then you guys can write them down so that you have them, and then I'll show you the example. Sorry, let me get situated here. I'll show you how to go back and check those. So let's write down the steps. What we're doing, let's get our Cornell notes here. What we're doing is called linear regression. Regression is a type of calculation that the calculator is going to do in order to take those points and make the equation of the line. Give you the equation of the line. So linear regression on a calculator. So we just did it by hand, and now we're going to show you how to do it on a calculator, and this is really cool. Okay, so let's just write down all the steps, and then I will walk you through it with the examples. Okay, so the first button you're going to push is the Stat button. Okay, So for buttons, I'm going to draw little rectangles like that. So you're going to do stat, and you're going to choose the option edit. That's the first step, and this will make sense in just a second when I show you. Then you know what, let's go ahead and do it actually. Let's go ahead and do it. So take your calculator there, and who knows what was going on with this calculator before you got it, so let's go ahead and clear it out. So the way you clear it out is that you are going to use the second button right here, this blue button that says second. You're going to go second and down here to plus. It's going to take you into the memory. Second plus, we want to reset everything. So we want option 7. So option 7, just hit the 7. And then we want option 1, we want to clear all the RAM. And then we want option 2, which is reset. So second plus 712 will clear your RAM. You always want to do that when you're starting over in a class because you don't know what the person before you did on the calculator. Okay, so you know what, on my paper over here on the side, this is important. You can do it all the time. I'm going to write to clear RAM on your calculator. You're going to go second, so that's a button, so I'm going to put it in a button, plus, and then I'm going to go 7, 1, 2. Those are all buttons. Second plus 7, 1, 2. So that's how you clear your calculator, second plus 7, 1, 2. So then I'm going to go stat edit. So let's go ahead and do it. So the stat button is right here, close to the top. So go ahead and hit that stat button, and you're going to choose option 1 for edit. So you can either hit the number 1 or you can hit enter. And you should see this screen with L1 and L2. If you don't see L1 and L2, please raise your hand because your calculator is messed up and your teacher needs to fix it. So L1 and L2, okay, you'll see other stuff as well. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to input our data. So let's write that as the next step. So input data into L1 and L2, okay? In L1, these are going to be your X's, and L2 is going to be your Y's, okay? So if we look back at our first example, which I'm hoping that you have there in front of you on your notes, that would be this example 1 right here. We already have a table with our X's and our Y's. So we are going to go to our calculator, and we're going to input all of our X's into the L1. So that would be 2, and then you have to hit enter. 4, enter, 6, enter, 8, enter, okay? And then I'm going to use my little right arrow and go over to L2, and I'm going to enter 7, enter, 11, enter, 15, enter, and 19, enter, okay? So I have my little table. There's my table on my paper. I just inputted it into the calculator, okay? So once I input my data, let's write down the next steps. I am going to go to the stat button again, and then I'm going to hit the button that has a right arrow. I'm going to go to the right once, and I'm going to choose calc. Okay, so let me demonstrate that. And if you need to pause the video so you can get caught up here. So I'm going to go back to the stat button. I'm going to go stat, and I have to go to the right because you see where it says calc up here at the top. So I'm going to go to the right to calc, and then let's go to our next step. So my next step is that I'm going to choose option 4, linear regression. It says linreg. So for my next step, I'm going to choose option 4, which is linreg, and it says AX plus B. Now, this A is the same as M. This is the slope. Okay, this is the same thing as your M. They just have it as an A on the calculator. I don't know, maybe it's too hard to make an M on the calculator, a lowercase m, I don't know. But anyway, we're going to choose option 4. So you can either scroll down to that number 4 and hit enter, or you can just hit the number 4. Okay, now, from here, just to make it easier later on, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get the calculator to store your equation for you. So this is a good habit to get in. So from here, you're going to enter 3 times so that your cursor goes down to store regression equation. So we're going to go enter, enter, enter. So let's go ahead and write that down. I'm going to go enter, enter, and enter. So 3 times takes you down to where you can store your regression equation. and I'll show you in a minute where it gets stored, we are going to store it in Y1. So there is a really easy shortcut to get to Y1. To get to Y1, and I know this is a lot of buttons, that's why we're writing them all down. You'll know this like the back of your hand by the end of the year, but you're going to hit this alpha button. This is like a little shortcut. So you're going to go alpha and trace, and it gives you the option to select Y1. So I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to pop a Y1 right there. So let's write our buttons down. So I'm going to do alpha, trace, and Y1. So I'm going to choose that Y1 option, okay? Then I'm done with this screen. I'm going to go enter, enter, and that's going to calculate for me, okay? So I'm going to write down all my steps here. Make sure you write these all down so you can look back and know what you're doing. So enter, enter. Okay, at that point, it gives me y equals ax plus b, which is the same as y equals mx plus b. So it's basically telling me a is equal to 2, b is equal to 3, so that means y equals 2x plus 3. What the calculator also did, because we told it to store the equation, it stored it under y equals in Y1, because that's what we told it to do. So if you go to y equals, my equation should be sitting there, and that is in fact the equation that we got on example 1 when we did it earlier in our notes. So now let's go ahead, and I want you to go through. I'm going to walk through it with you, but we're going to go through and we're going to do example 2 and check it on the calculator. All right, so follow your notes, and I'm going to do it with you. So we're going to check and see if this is the correct equation for this data that we had, okay? So let's go to the data. So my first step, as you saw in your notes, is going to stat. So I'm going to hit stat, and I'm going to hit edit. Well, there's a bunch of junk in there already. You can type over it, but let me just show you a couple of quick ways to clear your lists. First of all, you can just go up to the top and highlight the list and hit clear and enter, and it'll clear that whole list for you. Okay, so I'm going to go up to the top, I'm going to hit clear and enter, and it's going to clear that whole list for me. If I've got a bunch of stuff in here, I can do second plus, like we started to clear our whole calculator, but I can just go down here to clear all lists. Second plus 4 will also clear your lists. You can write that down. That might help you out later because we'll be using a lot of data later. So clear all lists and enter, and that will do it for you. So go to stat edit, clear all your lists out, and then let's go and follow the steps that you wrote down. Go ahead and see if you can follow them, and I'm going to do them with you. So we'll go stat. I'm going to add my data in here. So here's 2, 4, 6, 8. This is example 2 that we did in the notes. And -2, remember to hit the negative and not the minus. -3, -4, -5. Okay? Now, we go back to stat. And now I want to calculate the equation, so I go to the right to calc. And then I'm going to go down to linear regression. Hit enter. Enter 3 times down to store regression equation, and I want my y1 in there. So I'm going to go alpha trace, bam, there's my y1. Enter, enter, and there's my equation. And if you want to see it written as your equation, you can go to y equals, and it should be in there. So y equals -0.5x. Now that says plus -1. Is that the same thing? -0.5 is the same thing as -1/2, so that's the same. Is -1 the same thing as plus -1? Yes, it is. Okay, so you have to do some thinking here, but this does verify that we did in fact get the right answer. So on your assignment that you're going to do, you're going to do it both ways. You're going to do the 3-column process chart, get your answer, and then you're going to go to your calculator, and you're going to get really fast at this. It seems like it's a long process, but it's really not. You're going to get real fast. You're going to go to stat, edit, put your data in, and go calculate your regression equation and make sure that you got the right answer. Okay? Thank you so much. Goodbye.